So I guess Terrifier 3 is my first Christmas movie review of 2024. Who saw that coming? Art the Clown is back for more bloody mayhem, and fear not, I will be avoiding spoiler talk until nearer the end of the video. Before I begin, I will quickly say what I thought of the first two movies. Terrifier was okay. The only two things that stood out about it was David Howard Thornton's exceptional performance, which goes for all three movies. He plays Art the Clown, who is a silent killer type, much like Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees. But rather than being tall, dark and expressionless, he is very expressive. His body language and facial expressions are next level, and he brings this wonderful, energetic physicality to the slasher genre. So yes, he was great. And the other thing about the first movie that stood out was the excessive blood and guts. All three are very gory movies, but that's where it stopped for the first one. Because outside of Thornton's acting and the gore, it really had nothing else. The movie lacked genuinely interesting characters and an engaging story, which is fair enough when you look at it from the scope of where we are now with Terrifier 3. Because watching it today feels like this was just testing the waters. This is just getting the audience acquainted with Art the Clown, and that after this, all the bigger, better stuff will follow. Speaking of what followed, Terrifier 2. My god, that added everything that was missing. Characters I cared about, good acting, and a more interesting story, whilst going bigger with all of the other stuff as well. I think Terrifier was a hit with a niche group of fans, but Terrifier 2 was the one that brought Art the Clown much closer to being a mainstream slasher icon. And Terrifier 3, I am very pleased to say, expands on what worked in 2, bringing back Lauren Lavera and Elliot Fulham as Sienna and Jonathan Shaw. They pick their stories up from where the second movie left off. Jumping 5 years down the line, the movie deals with the aftermath of Part 2 and the mental scars that both of these characters are struggling to push through.
Why would he come back here? Even if he was alive, which he isn't. Wouldn't you want to get as far away from here as possible, as far away from you?
We both know this isn't over.
I thought the movie handled it pretty well, but true enough, other horror movies have done this and done it better, but nevertheless, it was still good here. And it was great seeing both of these characters back. They were what made Terrifier 2 as good as it was. Especially Sienna. They built her up to be a strong, fierce survivor, ready to do battle against Art the Clown. And while we do see the toll that took on her, we certainly do get more of those characteristics in Terrifier 3. So yes, Art and Sienna meet again and fight it out, and it was pretty damn good. And while Sienna was not in the first Terrifier movie, I am starting to see these two as definitive rivals. The same way Laurie and Michael are long-standing rivals in the Halloween franchise. Basically a horror version of the double act. Being a slasher fan, I don't think I will ever tire of seeing these two trying to kill each other. I say that, you know what's gonna happen. Jump 10 years down the line and you're gonna see me stood here going, Terrifier 8? Really? Come on now. I am glad that they brought these two characters back and continued their story. It would have been easy enough to make a third movie and leave them out of it. Because you could argue that their stories were complete enough by the end of Terrifier 2, but instead of leaving them out of it, they made the right decision to bring them back and build on their story in a way that makes sense. Although I will say that perhaps they could have done a bit more with Jonathan in this movie. As for other characters, they do introduce several new ones, and a lot of them are there just to up the body count. And damn does this movie have a body count. There are kill scenes in this movie that I didn't even see coming. But that's all I'll say about that. They do introduce a new main character in the form of Gabby, Sienna's cousin, played by Antonella Rose. She was a likeable child character. You know, the one thing that's there to make the audiences go, oh no, don't kill the kid! Yeah, that is something that you can definitely say about the Terrifier franchise. Kids are not safe in them. Their lives are on the menu too. So yeah, Gabby was there to add in that extra layer of vulnerability. But she did more than just that. She helped Sienna with her recovery, and emotionally built her up enough to face Art the Clown again when the time came. Story-wise, we do learn more about the supernatural aspect of the Terrifier movies. In the second movie, Art was resurrected and met a creepy girl with glowing eyes. Well, in this one, that story continues, but we don't see the girl again. Instead, it shifts into somebody else. But all I'll say for now is I liked what they did with that. It was much more prominently featured in this movie rather than being the background side piece that it was in the second one. As for the blood and guts, definitely plentiful. I have heard stories about people throwing up in theatres and complaining that it's just too much. And while fortunately no one threw up in my screening, although what a story that would be. But I did overhear people on the way out saying that that was a little bit too much. And it has to be said, this movie is certainly the most brutal one yet. It is absolutely gratuitous violence and a complete feel-no-shame gore-fest, but that is what these movies are built on. I cannot imagine anyone bought a ticket for Terrifier 3 and didn't know what it was they were walking into. This isn't the 70s or 80s where a sequel would come out and you might not know anything about the previous one and you'll just go, meh, let's have a night at the movies and give it a shot. Trailers, interviews, promotional material, they're all readily available, and the previous movies have been streaming on VOD services for years now. So all I can really say is, do your homework before trying Terrifier 3. As a counterbalance to the extreme amount of bloody violence, I do feel that this movie has a sense of humour. A very twisted sense of humour, but it is there. One scene in particular sees Art the Clown meeting a fake Santa Claus at a bar. Sounds like the start to a bad joke. Not gonna spoil it, but they do play up the comedy in this scene, which 100% comes down to Thornton's acting and how well the guy dressed as Santa was bouncing off of that. Seriously, I love that scene. It's like Art the Clown was a kid at Christmas. It was brilliant. It is playful, cheery, and just a tiny bit homicidal. Which is a great thing, that this movie isn't without a small amount of light-hearted playfulness, which does help break up the set pieces featuring the more brutal scenes. Whereas there are movies out there, such as Hostel, which I find to be dark, depressing, and equally as violent. Okay, maybe not equally as violent. Terrifier 3 wins the medal for that, but certainly more depressing. Personally, I find movies like that less enjoyable than ones that, although twisted, have a sense of humour, which I totally understand can get drowned out by all of the blood and guts, and perhaps some people will be sickened too much to be able to see any of that. But again, it is a Terrifier movie, you know what you're in for. I think if you enjoyed the first two, or at least the second one, Terrifier 3 is for you. If you didn't like either of those, this won't change your mind. These films are in no way everyone's cup of tea. Overall, Terrifier 3 I will give... Actually no, I'll rank all three of them. Terrifier is a 5 out of 10. It is a very average movie that I do have to admit was impressively made on a very low budget. Terrifier 2 rises far past that to a 7 out of 10. Well above average and is a solid good slasher movie. If you want to know more about my opinions on those two movies, feel free to check out my full reviews on them. Links down in the description. As for Terrifier 3, I will give it a 7.5 out of 10. It is better than part 2, but not by much. It expands on the lore, has bigger set pieces and builds on Sienna's character, which is why it is better. But for this to reach an 8 out of 10 or higher, I'm going to need to see more new interesting characters and do more with all of the previously existing characters you already had. Because like I said, it was nice to have Jonathan back in it, and they do some things with his character, but really not much at all. He just felt present in the movie, and that was really it. And the movie needs to not just have newbie characters for the sake of upping the body count, but actually make them fun and interesting characters rather than just serviceable. It is something that a lot of slasher movies do, and it holds them all back. But a great slasher movie makes you care about the majority of the characters, so it becomes more meaningful when they die. Movies such as Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Scream were all very good at that. Terrifier is doing really well, and I can still see great things in the future if they keep pushing and expanding on what works, but they absolutely need to focus on characters more. So yes, Terrifier 3, 7.5 out of 10. A good slasher movie. I would recommend going out to see this if you like a gore fest of a movie. If not, you've probably already made up your mind. So like, comment, subscribe, and with that, let's talk spoilers. Yes, spoilers, 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 get out, there are spoilers. Right, number 1 is Vicky. If you don't remember, Vicky is the protagonist of the first Terrifier movie, and survived but was horrifically mutilated by Art the Clown. Then in Terrifier 2, Sienna was very mean to Art and chopped his head off. Which is where that movie ended. Then in the post-credit scenes, Vicky, who was in a hospital, gave birth to Art's head. This movie picks up exactly where that left off. A headless killer clown makes his way to the hospital and attaches his new head. It was quite funny seeing him on the train because he killed somebody else and wore their head. It was amusing. Looked weird, but it was amusing. Then he and Vicky, who is the new demon girl thingy, essentially become a murderous duo. Now rather than Vicky just going evil, it's more she has died and been possessed by this entity. And while the movie's focus is absolutely still on Art the Clown, he is the face of evil in this. Vicky still fulfills a large role as well. And she can speak, which gives this movie a more unique finale compared to the previous two because this evil can verbally communicate with Sienna. So we get that as well as all of the silent killer stuff that Art was doing and the showdown between him and Sienna. So they managed to successfully implement Vicky as an antagonist, and the makeup and costume design for her? Very well done. In fact, makeup and costume design has been a very solid effort all the way through the Terrifier films, which helps amplify David Howard Thornton's already excellent performance. So credit where credit is due for that. And even more credit for taking that weird-ass post-credit scene of Terrifier 2 and making it actually make sense and be a good plotline for Terrifier 3. The other spoiler that I wanted to talk about is Jonathan. I said before that they could have done more with his character, and I do hope that they do in Terrifier 4. Towards the end of the movie, he is supposed to be heading over to meet Sienna, but Art the Clown attacks Sienna and knocks her out. She comes to, and Art and Vicky are taunting her and trying to break her spirit so that they can possess her. And in an attempt to break her spirit, they show her a skull. They claim that this is Jonathan, and while it very well could be, Terrifier isn't really one to shy away from killing people on screen. Whether that be by shoving rats down somebody's throat, or by Art the Clown butt-fucking a guy with a chainsaw. Told you it was messed up. But yeah, I feel like they were lying and Jonathan is in fact still out there. Maybe alive and well, or kidnapped and tortured. Either way, I think we'll be seeing him again. Part of me thinks maybe he will be the next possessed guy. Because Vicky was melted away and Art the Clown escaped and is likely plotting his return. So they could possess Jonathan and have him be what they try to use to break Sienna. Either way, I would be surprised if he is dead, and that's that. Also, they touched on this a little in 2, but more in this movie. There is a reason why they want to corrupt Sienna so badly. There seems to be a bigger battle between good and evil going on, which we see glimpses of. But it looks like Sienna was chosen by these forces of goodness to combat this evil entity, which has chosen to keep resurrecting the madness that is Art the Clown. And Sienna's mysterious father, who was a comic book artist of sorts, created this badass female character that could defeat evil with a sword that could not hurt her. And this character is what Sienna seems to be. She even dressed up as this character for Halloween in Terrifier 2. And we did see a little of this supernatural aspect from Sienna when she wielded the sword to fight Art. I feel that Terrifier 4 really needs to explore this. And given that it looks like she's going to hell to find Gabby, as she fell into a pit of damnation at the end of this movie, which is the perfect setting for Terrifier 4 to do some really mad stuff. Actually, I'm not all that sure I want to know what hell looks like in the Terrifier universe. Probably makes Hellraiser look like Candyland. And on that note, that's all from me. Please let me know what you think of Terrifier 3 and whether you would want to see Terrifier 4. You've been watching Good or Bad, and if you've enjoyed today's video, please hit those like and subscribe buttons, and I will see you next time.